My name is Hannah Mercer. And just when I thought I'd finally escaped that dark life, he walked into the room, furious, silent, with his hand raised high like I was no longer a person, just rebellious property. I stood blocking the bedroom door, behind me the labored breaths of my 3 children. But then, the bathroom door swung open, another man stepped out, and everything changed. I don't know if you've ever had to run from the very person who once vowed to protect you. But if you've ever found yourself wondering, am I really living? Or just trying to breathe inside a cage locked by sweet words? Stay with me, because the story I'm about to tell isn't just about pain. It's about a twist no one saw coming. Leave a comment if you've ever felt misunderstood in your own home. And don't forget to like and follow the channel to hear the rest of my journey toward freedom, beginning with a mother who once believed no one was on her side. I still remember the last morning I had my mother by my side, as if time had stitched every detail together with red thread, so that whenever I touch the memory, it's warm and sharp. That day, the sky over New Hampshire was as clear as a blank page. Mom wore a chestnut-colored sweater, frayed slightly at the elbows, and had tied her hair back loosely with a dark ribbon. The scent of oil paint and mint drifted through our little kitchen. The same smell I still unconsciously search for whenever I walk into old art shops. "What are you painting?" I asked. I was 6.5 then, sitting cross-legged on the floor, with colored pencils scattered around my feet. She smiled and gently turned the canvas to face me. On it was a small house nestled in a pine forest, its windows glowing with light and the roof shingled in reddish-brown wood. The sky behind it glowed with a sunset orange, and in front of the door were 2 figures, mother and child, hand in hand. "I call it the house for when you're ready," she said, her voice soft like late autumn wind. "One day, when you look back, you'll understand why I had to go." I didn't understand, of course not. Why would anyone leave their child? But I was used to the vagueness in her words, as if her thoughts always floated in paint colors and songs playing only in her head. That night she fed me apple pie and washed my hair with the lavender shampoo I loved. Before bed she kissed my forehead and whispered, "No matter what happens, you are still the brightest light I've ever known." I didn't know it would be the last time I heard her voice. The next morning, she was gone. No note, no trace. No one filed a proper police report. They said she might have been depressed, that she might have wandered off and gotten lost. A few whispered that my mother was unstable. I was too young to understand what they were really trying to deny, but I remembered clearly that she had tucked an envelope behind the painting from the day before. Inside she had written, "My dearest Hannah, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. Don't be afraid. I didn't abandon you. I just needed you to be safe. To live. One day, when you're old enough to understand, I hope you can forgive me. I'll always be here, in everything good you touch. With all my heart." I kept that letter for 2 years, until someone from social services found it and took it away because it could cause psychological harm. I've never forgiven them for that. After it all happened, I was placed in foster care. The first home was a creaky 2-story house where the woman never called me by my real name. "Hannah, get me that handkerchief," she'd bark as if I were a maid. Her husband was glued to the TV, never leaving his chair. I lived in silence, ate in silence, went to school, did my homework, washed dishes. No one asked if I was okay. Until one day a silver car pulled up in front of the house. A tall woman with graying hair stepped out. Her eyes were kind, but steady. Marian. She was my father's new wife, the man I barely remembered from 3 foggy childhood visits. He didn't come to get me. Marian came alone. I still remember how she knelt to meet me at eye level, holding out her hand. "You're Hannah, right? I'm Marian. I'm going to take you home, but before we go, I want you to know, I'm not here to replace anyone. You don't have to call me Mom. I just want you to know, you won't have to figure everything out alone anymore." Marian lived in the suburbs, in a cream-colored house with jasmine vines on the porch. She was a retired nurse, a good cook, and had a habit of reading stories to me every night, even when I didn't ask. One time, I dropped a bowl of soup. My hands trembled in fear as I bent down to pick it up, stammering an apology. But Marianne knelt beside me and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes we spill. That's why we have towels." That simple sentence made me cry. She never pried about my mother. But one afternoon, while folding laundry, I asked, was she not normal? Marianne looked up, her eyes still gentle but clear. "No one's normal, Hannah. Some people carry more. Some hurt but never say a word. I never met your mom, but if she brought you into this world, I don't believe she could have been a bad person. I carried that with me through the rest of my childhood." My father was rarely home. He was a marine engineer, always away on ships. When he returned, he brought me expensive toys and expected a properly delivered thank you. We shared a roof, but never a memory strong enough to feel close. It wasn't until I was 12 that I dared to retrieve my mother's painting from a dusty attic box. Under the taped back panel, I found something I had never noticed. A faint line in graphite. Gavin knew. At the time, I didn't know what it meant. Who was Gavin? What was Mom trying to say? But I kept it. Like a secret code waiting to be cracked. Years later, I would understand. Some secrets don't live in drawers. They live in blood. In memory. In that nameless fear you never quite understand until someone has to act. To save themselves. I met Gavin Mercer in my final year of college, in a seminar on multicultural education. At the time, he was the youngest adjunct faculty member in the department. Sharp, polished, brilliant, and with a way of looking at people that made you feel like you were being evaluated and chosen. I was the only student who dared to challenge his argument in that first discussion. I simply disagreed. But after class, Gavin walked over, placed his hand on my desk, and smiled. "You made me rethink my own point. Not many people can do that." As someone who had always lived quietly and cautiously, that compliment shook me more than I'd admit. Gavin approached me with a calm, deliberate charm. He wasn't pushy or overly flattering. He just listened, asked the right questions, and made me feel like I mattered. We started getting coffee after class, which turned into long evenings talking about education, society, and philosophy. Gavin told me about his childhood in a strict military family and his longing to build a life with enough order, enough cleanliness, so no one would hurt anymore. At the time, I thought that was beautiful. When he said he loved me, I didn't hesitate. When he proposed, a year after I graduated, I believed it was the right decision. He was 10 years older, established, owned a home, and had a clear future. I thought I was lucky. At first, living with Gavin felt like stepping into a perfectly typeset book. Meals had schedules, every item in the house had its place, he hung his suits by color, folded towels in precise alignment, polished his shoes every night, even if it hadn't rained. "Order creates safety," he said. I didn't object. As a child raised in chaos, I understood the comfort of predictability. But what I didn't expect was that when order slipped from his control, it would turn into sharp criticism, furrowed brows, and a coldness that cut like steel. "Don't wear that red dress. It's too short. Tonight's event is full of academics. You should let me do the talking. You talk too much about your childhood. Not everyone needs to hear that." I used to think that was helpful advice, that he was guiding me toward maturity. But slowly I realized those words weren't about growth. They were about obedience. After I gave birth to Noah, our first son, everything shifted more drastically. Gavin didn't come to the delivery room. He said he couldn't handle blood. I didn't blame him. But when I lay there, sweat and tears still fresh, holding our newborn on my chest, he stopped by for 10 minutes, glanced over, and said, "Looks fine. You should sleep. I need to prep for tomorrow's lecture." No hug, no congratulations, not even a glance for Noah. I told myself maybe he struggled with emotion, maybe he was tired, maybe I expected too much. That was always my line. Gavin managed our finances. "Let me handle it. You've never been great with money," he said after we merged accounts. I gave up my credit card. My phone had a family tracker app for safety. He set the schedules for teaching, grocery runs, even our kids' doctor visits. When I suggested hiring part-time help during the week, Gavin raised an eyebrow. "Then what's the point of you being home?" I learned to stay quiet to get things done, not because I thought I was wrong, but because I knew what came next if I pushed back. Frigid nights and words that sliced like blades. After I had our second child, Ruby, I started feeling like I was disappearing inside my own skin. I'd look in the mirror and see a woman with greasy hair, hollow eyes, trembling arms rocking a crying baby. And I'd wonder, where did I go? Gavin didn't change. He remained polished, still lecturing at the university as a specialist in educational psychology. People called him insightful and devoted. They didn't know that, at home, he once whispered in my ear, "You're too fragile. You're making the kids anxious with that unstable mind of yours." That night I sat on the bathroom floor holding a feverish Ruby, trembling as I typed a message to Marian. "I'm okay, but if anything happens, can you take care of Noah and Ruby?" I didn't send it, I saved it in drafts. The first time Gavin used physical force, I had accidentally spilled coffee on his printed documents. He didn't yell. He stared at me, then grabbed my wrist and squeezed until I cried out. "Is this what a mother looks like?" he said quietly. "You have one job. Don't disrupt this life." I didn't go to the doctor. I told Marian I bumped into a door. I started memorizing the sound of Gavin's footsteps when he got home. At the sound of keys turning, I'd shut off the TV, wipe the counters, fix my hair. I forgot who I used to be. I was now someone who read her husband's moods to dodge the storm. I don't know when I stopped calling it love. I only know that every time Gavin placed his hand on my shoulder in front of others, I had to fight the urge to step away. And somewhere deep inside, I no longer believed him. But I also didn't know what to do with that truth. That day, the sky was gray and cold wind rustled the trees outside the elementary school where Noah was in 3rd grade. I went to the parent-teacher meeting as scheduled, wearing a thick brown coat, head down, clutching a small notebook like a shield. Gavin never came. "Kids are your job. I've got more important things to focus on," he'd say. I was used to going alone, used to the curious, slightly pitying looks from other mothers as I rushed in with a folder in one arm, glancing at my watch, already worrying about dinner. I walked into the meeting room and sat in the back row. The teacher began presenting the class progress, and then parents were called in one by one for individual updates. When it was my turn, she smiled and said, "Mrs. Hannah Mercer, please." I rose and stepped into the small conference room, unaware that everything was about to change. The man standing near the info board wasn't the principal or school counselor like I assumed. He wore a crisp white shirt, black tie, tall frame, broad shoulders. But it was the eyes that froze me. Ash gray eyes, warm but deep, like they'd seen things the world tries to forget. "Excuse me, you are?" I asked. He turned, slightly startled. Then his lips curled into a slow smile. "Anna." I stepped back half a pace. That name, spoken in a voice no longer boyish but still familiar, stretched something tight in my chest. "Eli?" I gasped, heart pounding. Eli Morgan, the friend I once had in my very first foster home. The one who used to save me half a pack of cookies on freezing winter nights. The one who once said, "Someday, we won't have to be afraid anymore." "It's really you," he said, his voice deep and slow like he was afraid to wake trembling memories. I let out a shaky laugh. "You've changed so much. I almost didn't recognize you. But you still have that look in your eyes." Eli replied, "You can't hide the eyes of someone who's lived through pain." I didn't speak. I'd learned not to react too much when someone saw through me. But with Eli, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like being known. We sat at the small table. On it, Noah's academic folder, pencil sketches, test scores, and notes from the teacher. Eli said softly, "I'm the new security advisor for this district. There's a joint program between the FBI and the Department of Education to monitor potential risks in schools." "I didn't expect to see you here." Noah's in 3rd grade, Ruby's about to start kindergarten, and Caleb, he's a year and a half. His eyes softened. "So you became a mother." I gave a faint smile. "Yeah, being a mom sometimes feels like being a prison too." I said it, then bit my lip, realizing I'd said too much. Eli didn't flinch. He quietly pulled a small piece of paper from his jacket and placed it on the table. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But if one day you need someone, who believes you. This is my number. Personal, not work. You think I need rescuing? No, he said. I think you're rescuing yourself. I just don't think anyone should have to do that alone. I clenched my hands in my lap. There were so many things I wanted to say. About Gavin, about the bruises that concealer couldn't hide, about the fear that came every time I heard a man's footsteps behind me after work. But instead, I asked, "How did you know I wasn't okay?" Eli tilted his head, eyes steady on mine. Because I've lived like that, looking in the mirror and not recognizing myself, smiling so no one would ask more questions, walking like every sound could be an unexploded bomb. I burst into tears. Eli didn't reach for me. His voice, though, came soft and steady. Keep it somewhere safe, not to use right away, but to remind you, you're not forgotten. That night, after putting Ruby to bed, I quietly pulled the Paper Princess from the shelf, her favorite book. I opened it to the middle and taped the paper behind the hardcover, right where the author's dedications still held the scent of fresh ink. I didn't say a word to Gavin, not to anyone, but from that night on, every time I read that book to my daughter, I knew. In my hands wasn't a weapon. It was a way out. The house we lived in wasn't big, but Gavin always demanded it be as clean as a private hospital. Everything was arranged with clinical precision. The kids' toys had to go in the right bins, books had to stand perfectly upright. The only place I asked to be left alone was the downstairs playroom. I used creativity for Ruby as an excuse. Truthfully, it was the only space I could breathe. That afternoon, while Caleb was napping and Noah was doing homework, I was scrubbing a stubborn stain beneath the dining table when Ruby shouted from downstairs, Mom, come look at this." I wiped my hands on my apron, back aching from strain, and went down. Ruby sat cross-legged in the middle of old drawings, the ones I'd brought from Marion's house but never dared to hang because Gavin said they didn't match the interior. "What did you find, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She held up an old wooden frame, dust covering its edges, but inside was a painting I recognized instantly. A little house in the woods, with a mother and child holding hands on the porch, warm light spilling from the windows, as I remembered. "This one's so pretty," Ruby whispered. "Did you draw it?" I smiled, my throat tight. "No, baby. Grandma did, when I was a little girl. But I've never met Grandma. She went far away, sweetheart, but she loved me very much." Ruby tilted her head. "Mom, what's this?" She pointed to the back edge of the painting where the lining paper had peeled. I took the frame and gently removed more of the yellowed tape. Beneath it was a thicker sheet, glued down with old adhesive. I traced the edge and slowly pulled it away. Beneath was a faded ink mark buried in the priming layer. I had to tilt the frame to catch the light before I could read the nearly erased pencil writing. Gavin knew. I froze. How? Had my mother ever mentioned someone named Gavin? No. Or maybe I was too young to remember. Or maybe I'd tried to forget. I clutched the painting like someone holding the last shirt that still smelled like a lost loved one. Ruby looked up at me, confused. "Are you sad, Mom?" I shook my head and kissed her forehead. "It's okay, sweetie. I miss her a little." That night, I couldn't sleep. I took the painting and placed it on the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. Under the dim yellow light, I traced each brushstroke, the firm yet gentle lines. My mother never did anything halfway, especially not in her art. And she would never leave a message like that unless it mattered. I sifted through my memory, searching for pieces. Her letter, my nightmares, my biological father's silence. I remembered once asking Marion, not long after moving in, "Did my mom have enemies?" She'd only looked at me in silence, as if she wanted to say something but didn't. I began putting the pieces together. The painting, the hidden message, the disappearance without goodbye. The way Gavin, my husband, always acted defensive whenever I mentioned the past. The one time I told Gavin a little about my mom, he shrugged. "You shouldn't dig up what's already dead. Focus on being a good wife and mother." I used to think that was advice. Now it sounded like a command, and there was something in the way he said it, as if he knew something I didn't. The next day, while Gavin was at the university, I picked up my phone and typed into the search bar, Gavin, missing woman, New Hampshire. Nothing specific, I changed it. Margot Callahan, missing 1996. There was one single article, image blurred, from a local paper. 29-year-old woman, single mother, missing after dropping off child at preschool, no signs of struggle, police suspect depression. Below was a photo of my mother. Soft brown curls, sorrowful eyes. No mention of anyone named Gavin. I sat in stunned silence. Then remembered Eli. I pulled the paper princess from the shelf, hands shaking as I retrieved the slip of paper he'd given me. I wrote, Eli, it's Hannah. I have a question. It's about my mother and about Gavin. 10 minutes later, he replied, send me everything you have. I won't judge. I just want the truth. I stared at those words, feeling my heart beat slow. Like after years of wandering in fog, someone had finally said, we'll trace it all the way. I carried the painting back to the bedroom and slid it under the bed, right beneath my daughter's old storage box, a place I knew Gavin would never check. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but deep down, I understood. This was no longer just between me and Gavin. I'd thought I'd planned carefully enough. After sending the first message to Eli, we began exchanging brief updates through an encrypted app he recommended. No saved messages, no alerts. Every time I hit send, it felt like a drop of blood left my body, terrified someone might see. Eli didn't say much, just asked 3 questions. Do you and the kids have a place to go? Is there anyone who can support you for at least the first 24 hours? Are you willing to gather legal evidence if needed? He made no promises, offered no comfort. The plan came together simply, like a quiet but steady piece of music. I would take Caleb to a doctor's appointment. He really was teething and running a slight fever. Use that as an excuse to stop by Marion's nearby house and leave the 3 kids there for a few hours. During that window, Eli and I would meet with a representative from Hidden Pines Women's Center, a place he once worked with during a domestic violence investigation 2 years ago. I would sign a request for emergency protection, give my statement, and prepare for a safe relocation the following night. I had told Ruby, if anything strange happens, remember the app I showed you, the one with the little owl icon? You hold the middle button for 3 seconds, right, Mommy? That's right, but only if you really feel unsafe. When you're scared. She squeezed my hand. I understand. I'm not scared when you're here. I thought everything was about to shift toward an escape. I forgot. Gavin always knew how to stay one step ahead. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard the key turn in a sharper, more forceful way. Instinct made my hands stop mid-fold. Caleb's tiny shirt still in my lap. Gavin entered, coat still on, eyes like steel. In his hand was the phone I had hidden in my spare coat pocket, the one I used to communicate privately with Eli. The screen still lit up. The last message hadn't closed. Well, he said, voice disturbingly calm. Midnight picnic plans, Hannah? With who exactly? I jumped up, heart racing. It's just a message to an old friend. Old friend? He raised an eyebrow, stepping toward me. That guy from the parent meeting? The one who gave you a number, which you tucked inside a kid's book? I stepped back, trying to keep my voice steady. Gavin, I want safety. For me, for the kids. He let out a dry laugh. Safety? You're destroying this family and calling it safety? I moved toward the door, but he was faster. The door slammed shut behind him, the lock clicking like chains dragging across concrete. I turned and ran for the kitchen. He followed. Gavin, stop. Don't do something you'll regret. My voice trembled. I don't regret anything, he growled, and swung. I hit the floor hard, head striking the corner of a cabinet. Stars burst in my vision. My ears rang. The metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth. I crawled toward the landline, but he grabbed my arm and yanked me back. You think you can run from me? I opened my mouth to scream, then came a knock. From the bathroom door. Just a soft knock. But enough to freeze both of us. Gavin turned sharply. The door creaked open. Eli stepped out, slow, calm, wearing a black hoodie, his ash-gray eyes now colder than the midnight air. "Evening, Gavin," he said. "Looks like you forgot to lock the back door." Gavin's face drained of color. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the one who got the emergency signal from your daughter, and the only one here who's not going to let you hit anyone ever again." Gavin lunged. Eli dodged, caught his wrist and twisted it behind Gavin's back with practiced ease. In seconds, Gavin was on the floor, arm pinned, body immobilized. "You do realize that exposing minors to domestic violence is a federal offense," Eli said, voice like steel. "And I've recorded everything, including your indirect confession just now." I sat on the floor, stunned, breathless. A second later, Ruby burst into the room in tears. "I pressed it, Mommy. I saw Dad was mad. I pressed it." I pulled her into my arms, shaking too hard to speak. Eli looked up. "Local police are en route. I called them the second Ruby's signal came through. Now, Hannah, we need to pack. You and the kids are coming with me." I always pictured myself leaving in silence, suitcase in hand, no words, no sound. But the night I left, Gavin was the one on his knees. And I, though bruised and broken, was finally standing tall. The police arrived faster than I expected. As red and blue lights flashed through the windows, Gavin lay restrained on the floor, shoulder locked under Eli's knee, arms pinned behind his back. His face was pressed to the hardwood, breath ragged like a trapped animal. I sat by the wall, holding Ruby tightly as she trembled. The other two children had been quietly led out by Marion, who had arrived after a signal from Eli. Two officers stepped inside, followed by an older man in an FBI jacket, clearly the superior. They flashed their IDs. No questions needed. It was clear everything had been quietly lined up, waiting for this exact moment. "Eli Morgan?" The older man nodded, then turned to me. "You must be Hannah Mercer?" "Yes." He turned to Gavin. "Mr. Mercer, you are being detained for domestic violence witnessed by minors. You are also under investigation in an unresolved missing person case from 1996. Gavin smirked, though his lip had begun to bruise. "You have no evidence. That case was closed decades ago." Eli replied evenly, like reciting something long memorized. "Not quite. Last week we re-excavated the old attic of the apartment where Hannah's mother once lived. Inside a floorboard-sealed cabinet, we found a cloth with dried blood and a ceramic ring engraved with the name Hannah, when her mother had custom-made when her daughter turned 5. The blood sample was retested using updated technology." He paused, pulling out a sealed envelope and handing it to the lead investigator. DNA matched Gavin Mercer. I heard Ruby's shaky breath. I gently squeezed her shoulder, tucking her hand in mine. Gavin said nothing. He glared at Eli, then at me, and finally he smiled, a hollow smile that chilled me to the bone. "She's unstable," he hissed. "So was her mother. She's delusional. Raising those kids in crisis mode. I was just trying to keep order." "Your order?" Eli said. "Buried one woman and turned 3 children into witnesses of abuse. You don't get to speak anymore, Mercer." Outside, I heard footsteps on the stairs. The door opened. An older woman stepped in. Short hair, thick sweater, eyes sharp. "Mrs. Blake," Eli said. "Did you bring the recording logs?" It was the neighbor from downstairs, the one who used to ask me every Monday morning, "Did the baby sleep well last night?" Now she walked into the room like a witness who had waited far too long to tell the truth. "I recorded everything from the past 4 weeks," she said, voice calm but firm. "I don't know the full story, but every night I heard banging, kids crying. I recorded. One child said, 'Mom, I'm scared,' when Dad comes home. That's when I knew I had to stop staying silent." Eli accepted the hard drive from her. "We'll take it from here. Thank you for doing the right thing." When the officers cuffed Gavin, I didn't look away. I wanted him to see me, to see that I was still standing, awake, aware, even if with a shattered heart. Gavin looked back at me, his image shattered. The respected professor was gone. All that remained was a man built on fear, now stripped of it all. "You think you've won," he spat. Eli stepped in front of me, not as a protector, but as a friend who had promised I wouldn't face the dark alone anymore. As the officers led Gavin out, I still couldn't breathe normally. Ruby had fallen asleep in my arms, her little face damp with tears. Eli turned to me, voice low and steady. Anna, it's not over yet, but right now, you and the kids are safe. I never imagined that the feeling of breaking apart could arrive so quietly. The kids and I were placed in a transitional house within the Women's Protection Network in the northern suburbs. Security cameras on every corner, and a site manager named Maggie, whose voice was as steady as the earth itself. The room was small but clean. 2 bunk beds, an old coffee table, a window overlooking a garden where white daisies were already in bloom even though it was early spring. That night, I settled at the edge of the bed while the 3 children slept soundly after a long day. Ruby still clutched her teddy bear, Noah faced the wall like he always did, and Caleb lay against my chest until he drifted off. The next morning, Marian came. She brought a small bag with a few sets of clothes for the kids, some toasted bread, and an old olive green silk scarf I used to wear in college to tie back my hair. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me on the back porch, beneath the wide arms of an old oak. I know you have a lot of questions, she said, her voice slow, her gaze far away. I should have told you sooner, but I thought, if you didn't remember, maybe it would hurt less. I tightened my hands in my lap. It's about my birth mother, isn't it? Margot, your mother. She was my best friend when we were young. We studied art together in Boston. When she got pregnant with you, Gavin left. She returned to New Hampshire, lived quietly, painted, and supported you with a meager income from a bookstore. I didn't respond. My heart was beating faster, my body already sensing that what I was about to hear would change the way I looked at my past forever. Gavin found Margot again when you were 3. He had made it by then. Money, status, and said he wanted to make things right. At first, your mother refused, but he was persistent, charming in all the right ways. Eventually, she agreed to let him visit. For you. I turned toward her, my voice hoarse, and then Marian took my hand. Just a few months later, everything changed. Margot started showing up at my door in the middle of the night, bruised, shaking. She hid those things from you, but I saw. One time, she left you with me for 3 days, said she picked up an extra shift. My voice cracked. And you hid her? All night, Marian said. She showed up with a suitcase, blood on her wrist. She said, if I stay one more night, I'm not sure I'll survive. I brought her in, took care of her. But 2 days later, she disappeared. Left a letter. In it, she wrote, Hannah can't be near me. If Gavin knows I'm alive, he'll come for her. I jumped to my feet, my chest tight. She left because of me? Marian nodded, her eyes rimmed red. She believed it was the only way to protect you, and I promised. Not to search, not to contact her. Only when you got older did I keep one final letter from her. But I was scared. Scared that if you knew, you'd hate both of us. I stayed quiet. There was no hatred toward Marian, and none toward my mother. It felt more like stepping into an old room where every memory I thought had fallen asleep suddenly rose up, gentle but fierce. A week later, Eli came in the early morning, dew still clinging to the grass. He wasn't in uniform, just a rolled-up shirt and a softer look than before. Do you want to see her? He asked, handing me a slip of paper with an address in Maine. The trip took over 3 hours, winding through mountain roads until we reached a small coastal town called Camden. On a cobblestone street, nestled between 2 bakeries and a craft shop, was a white-painted house with wisteria vines cascading from the porch. Eli parked. I'll wait in the car. You need your space. I stepped out, hands cold, legs trembling, heart pounding wildly. The door opened before I knocked. The woman standing there, hair fully gray, thinner than I remembered, but her eyes were the same. Soft brown eyes, like a river that never flows backward, yet carries everything it's ever touched. I'm Hannah, I said, my voice barely more than a breeze. She nodded gently, saying nothing. Then from her pocket she pulled out something. A linen handkerchief frayed at the edges, embroidered in pink thread. For Mom, from Hannah, age 5. We didn't run into each other's arms like in a movie, no music, no theatrics. Only 2 hands finding each other, and the quiet relief of breath shared at last. The first weeks in the Transitional Protection Program for single mothers were a blur between calm and panic. I often woke in the middle of the night, heart racing, sure Gavin would walk into the room any minute. There were mornings I brushed Ruby's hair with trembling hands. Moments when Noah spilled his milk and looked at me wide-eyed, fearful, as if he was bracing for anger. I'd have to turn away so my tears wouldn't fall right then and there. I started therapy with Dr. Owens, a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back neatly, always wearing earth-toned cardigans and asking questions that never felt like interrogation. In the first session, I barely spoke for 20 minutes, only answering basic questions. By the fourth, she asked, "When was the last time you touched something that reminded you who you still are?" I didn't answer right away, but that night I pulled out my old sketchbook, the one I used back in art class in college, before I married Gavin and gave up everything that felt non-essential. I sat at the kitchen table under a soft yellow lamp and redrew the painting my mother once made. The Little House in the Woods. This time I added 3 children on the porch. And me, kneeling down to hold them. I began volunteering at the Children's Center every Monday and Thursday afternoon, first by organizing books, cleaning toys, baking cookies. 3 weeks in, the manager, Linda, called me into her office. "Anna, the kids respond really well to you. You don't pressure them to talk, you just sit long enough for them to realize they're not alone. Have you considered joining the part-time support team?" I paused. "I don't have any counseling certification." "You have lived experience. And the calm of someone who survived," she smiled kindly. "You don't need to be a specialist to be someone's safe place." And within weeks, I returned to work, not just as a job, but as a piece of myself slowly stitching back together alongside those children. Ruby started drawing again. Her pictures no longer showed black rooms or faceless shadows. One picture made me stop for a long time. It was me, holding Ruby, with a little rainbow above us. In purple crayon she had written, slightly crooked, "Mommy, smile, I home." Noah too began to open up. He started asking me to read bedtime stories again. One night he pulled me close and whispered, "Mom, today at school, I told my friend that you make cookies, just like the big store downtown. I said you're the best chef in the world." Then he grinned. Light and bright, like I was hearing his real laugh for the very first time. And Caleb, the youngest, he was the first to call me Mama, clearly, sitting up after a fever in the middle of the night, looking around, grabbing my hand and whispering like a promise to himself, "Mama, not go." And I'm not going anywhere anymore. As for Eli, he never pushed through any doors. He waited on the porch, where I could always see him through the kitchen window, dropping things off or picking up Noah when I had therapy. We texted, rarely, just simple lines. Noah says he misses the end of the Fox and Bird's Nest story. Tearing off the book Ruby left behind. No confessions, no promises, no digging up the past. Until one Friday evening, while I was watering the little garden out back, Eli came by, holding a small clay pot with lavender. "For the new kitchen," he said, handing it to me, then paused. "Ruby told me you said the kitchen was missing a warm scent." I took the pot in my hands, didn't look at him right away, and quietly asked, "Are you waiting on someone else, Eli?" He smiled. "No, but I used to be afraid I didn't have the patience to wait for someone who wasn't sure if she could trust anyone again. I didn't have to chase love. It stood there steady, like a little lavender plant, waiting to bloom." Behind me the door eased open. Eli stepped out holding a porcelain teacup with tiny ivory patterns, the one I once said reminded me of the kind I used to drink from with my mom. He sat beside me without a question, placed the cup gently on the table, and looked at me with eyes that didn't need explanations. "You okay?" he asked, voice low, calm like early morning water. I turned toward him, moonlight catching in the corner of my eye. But it wasn't tears. It was something closer to peace. I laid my hand over his, fingers slipping between his like they'd belonged there all along, misplaced for a while. "I've come a long way," I whispered, "and this time, I'm not going back." Eli said nothing. He didn't need to. His hand found mine steady enough to remind me I was here, fully present, nowhere else. From inside the house came a giggle. Ruby was whispering something to Noah. Caleb let out a sleepy mumble from his nap. The oven beeped. The cookies I'd forgotten were done. Warm light spilled from the window, casting a soft golden glow over the garden. I looked toward it, that little home with ferns on the porch, the scent of ginger tea in the kitchen, footsteps that startled no one, and hugs that didn't come with strings or gratitude owed. And I knew this wasn't the end. It wasn't luck. It was choice. A journey through the rubble, without carrying the wreckage. It was remembering who I was after being silent so long that I forgot the sound of my own voice. But now, I remember, I found it again, in my children's laughter, on a front porch chair, in a hand that never asked me to trade freedom for affection. Have you ever lived in silence so long that you couldn't tell the difference between who you were and the shell you had to wear to survive? I'm not telling this story to make anyone pity me. I'm telling it because somewhere out there, someone else might be holding their child's hand at night, trying to look brave inside a house that no longer feels safe. Someone might be wondering, do I have the right to leave? If you've ever been in that place, or if you've known someone like me, please leave a comment. Your words might reach someone who needs to hear exactly that. And if you want to keep following real stories about family, about choices, about those who dared to rise from the wreckage and rewrite their lives, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes healing begins with a story told at the right moment. Thank you for listening.